This is the second Intel Panther Lake mini PC we've had a chance to look at, and I've been genuinely looking forward to it. Intel's new mobile architecture has been absolutely killing it on the integrated graphics side, and now BOSGAME is throwing their hat into the ring with the VTI-490. Visually, it's identical to the AMD Ryzen model we reviewed a few weeks ago. Same unique look, with a plastic midsection sandwiched between a metal wrap. Just a top logo swapped out. The Mini feels reasonably solid, though the plastic core doesn't exactly scream premium. Under the hood sits the Intel Core Ultra X7 358H, positioned just one rung below the flagship tier in Intel's 2026 lineup. You get a mix of 16 performance, efficient, and low power efficient cores with zero hyperthreading. While the CPU is plenty powerful, the real star of the show is the ARC B390 integrated graphics. It easily outclasses AMD's current offerings in this form factor, which is great given AMD's recent streak of minor, repetitive refreshes. But here's the kicker. Intel's high-end Panther Lake silicon completely drops support for DDR5 SODIMM slots. Everything is soldered LPDDRX, meaning zero user upgrades down the line. To compensate, BOSGAME goes absolutely all out, packing this mini with a massive 64GB of LPDDR5X running at a blistering 9600 megatransfers. That is the fastest RAM we have ever seen in a mini PC on this channel. Period. For context, the Asus NUC 16 Pro we recently reviewed topped out at 8533. So, faster RAM means better performance across the board, right? Well, it's complicated, and we'll get into why in just a second. One thing that isn't complicated is the pricing strategy. At $1,700 US, it's a hefty investment. However, it costs exactly the same as a barebones Asus NUC 16 Pro, except BOSGAME includes double the RAM, a 1TB SSD, and a Windows license out of the box. Purely on paper, that value proposition is very aggressive. But price is only half the story. Like an onion, mini PCs have layers, such as features, thermals, noise, and raw performance. Peeling back some of these layers might just make your eyes water. So let's dig in, so you know exactly when to shield your eyeballs. In the box, you get a compact 19V 120W power brick, an HDMI cable, and the mandatory instruction manual that absolutely no one is going to read. When it comes to I/O, I think most users will prefer BOSGAME's layout over the Asus NUCs. On the front, we get a 3.5mm audio jack, which the NUC painfully lacked, a 40GB Thunderbolt 4 port supporting power delivery and display out, a USB 2 port, and the power button. Wireless and Bluetooth is handled by a modern Wi-Fi 7 module. Spinning it around to the back, we find dual LAN ports. But this is a super rare case of mini PC with this form factor featuring 10GB LAN next to the 2.5GB. You also get two more USB 2 ports, an Oculink connector, DisplayPort 1.4, a second Thunderbolt 4 port, however this one without power delivery, HDMI 2.1, and an additional audio jack. It's a great selection. It's a bit odd that the rear Thunderbolt 4 port doesn't support power delivery. It's usually much cleaner to route the single power and display cable solution from the back. Cracking it open requires removing just one screw, but fair warning, the lid is on tight. Don't yank it off forcefully, or you'll rip out the attached fan cable. And while the physical layout has room for 3 M.2 slots, only 2 are actually on the board. BOSGAME didn't specify the speeds, so I tested them both with the bundled Kingston Gen 4 drive. The primary slot runs at full Gen 4 X4 speeds, but the secondary slot is cut down to Gen 4 X1, capping out at around 1.8 GB per second. BOSGAME ships the VTI-490 with Windows 11 Pro, but my initial Malwarebytes scan flagged the exact same false positive registry modification I've seen on their previous machines. It's not malicious, but I'll say it again for good measure. BOSGAME, please just ship a complete clean Windows ISO next time. Thanks. If you're a Linux user, the latest version of Ubuntu booted just fine directly off the SSD, with Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and HDMI audio working right out of the gate without any troubleshooting. Now let's look at the performance. I tested the VTI-490 in its default balanced power profile as well as its maximum performance mode. Starting with Cinebench. Single core numbers look great, perfectly matching the Asus NUC 16 Pro. However, multi-core is where things get a little weird. We see a substantial performance drop compared to the Asus NUC. While performance mode helps close the gap, the VTI-490 still falls clearly behind AMD's Ryzen HX chips. Geekbench single core favors the Ryzen HX CPU slightly, though the Ultra X7 keeps it a close race. In Geekbench multi-core, the VTI-490 does well, matching the NUC 16 Pro when dialed into performance mode. For video, it can't quite match the NUC in pure CPU H.264 encoding, but it easily keeps pace with AMD's flagship mobile chips. It's a similar story in the longer AV1 export test. However, once we leverage the Intel Arc integrated graphics to assist with rendering, the BOSGAME ties the NUC 16 Pro performance. AI benchmarks are next, and the best result is taken, which is with performance mode. The same benchmark on the iGPU shows how far Intel is ahead of AMD's best, not something you'd expect after the dismal last few years. Strangely though, despite having a large memory speed advantage on paper, the VTI-490 consistently trailed just behind the Asus NUC in 3D Mark Firestrike. However, it flipped the script in TimeSpy and Steel Nomad Lite. Which brings us to the actual gaming tests. Given that 9600 megatransfers RAM speed, my expectation was that the BOSGAME would handily beat the NUC 16 Pro in gaming, but the real world results were unexpected. Note that all games were tested natively with zero upscaling or frame generation. Starting with a CPU heavy title like Counter-Strike 2, the VTI's frame rate is substantially lower than the Asus NUC. If you look at the metrics, the GPU utilization is nowhere near where it should be, which ideally is 99%. Moving over to Call of Duty, which heavily taxes the iGPU, we see a closer result. In Doom: The Dark Ages, both systems run neck and neck. The VTI falls slightly behind in Space Marine 2, but manages to secure its first minor win in Hellblade 2. Meanwhile, Resident Evil favored the Asus NUC. Emulation workloads which hit the CPU hard clearly favor the Asus Mini. If integrated graphics aren't enough, the presence of both Thunderbolt 4 and an Oculink port means the possibility of external GPU expansion. Shifting to productivity, the VTI actually takes a win over the NUC in code compilation across both power modes. Photoshop performance is pretty identical across both Intel chips, though AMD still holds the crown. In Premiere Pro, the VTI secures a comfortable second place, right behind the Asus NUC. As for storage, these pre-builds often cut corners with lower-end Kingston SSDs, and that's what we have here. Drive performance is nothing to write home about, but thankfully, the fan used to cool it keeps it from thermal throttling. Wireless performance is solid, with good Bluetooth range and very good 5 GHz Wi-Fi speeds even at 12 meters or 39 feet from the router. Alright, let's talk about power, because this reveals exactly why the faster RAM isn't yielding a victory. At idle, the VTI draws 12 watts from the wall, which is higher than the Asus NUC, but the real surprise is peak power draw. The Asus NUC aggressively boosts up to 115 watts from the wall, while the BOSGAME VTI-490 caps out at just 82 watts. While that means the BOSGAME has impressive performance per watt efficiency, it simply doesn't have the ability to sustain maximum boost clocks with more juice. On top of that, no matter what power profile you select, the BIOS forces thermal throttling at 88 degrees Celsius, which is far lower and more conservative than the thermal limits on the NUC. The upside to these strict limits is the effect on noise. Out of the box, fan noise stays under 40 decibels with all cores loaded, which is pretty decent. If you crank the power limit profile up, it climbs to a very noticeable 45 dBA. It's also worth noting this mini PC is quite bulky to what we normally see, easily exceeding a full liter in volume. Mashing the delete key at boot gets you into the BIOS. While most advanced settings are locked down, BOSGAME did place the essential toggles right at the top of the advanced tab. I really wish they gave us the freedom to manually raise the thermal limit or lock the sustained TDP to say 65 watts, but no cigar. So let's hit the mini PC checklist. BOSGAME's VTI-490 has a metal exterior which wraps around the plastic midsection. Build quality is okay. The price is the same as the competition, but comes with double the RAM, an SSD and OS, so that's why it gets a tick. But yes, I'm aware it's very pricey at $1,700 US, and that's not why it gets a tick. There's no bare bones option available, and apart from no ability to mount it, everything else is pretty good. This mini comes with the fastest memory yet, but it's not replaceable. I already mentioned the change in the OS earlier. It's not dangerous, but a clean Windows would be nice. Performance and CPU cooling are okay, not outstanding. Load fan noise out of the box is fine, but if you're planning to use performance mode, it's not great. That being said, either mode is still lower than the Asus NUC. Speaking of the Asus NUC, it comes with a 3-year warranty compared to 1 here, so that's a big advantage. Ultimately, the BOSGAME VTI-490 is an interesting machine. It offers a very nice feature set that the main competition misses, namely 10 gigabit LAN and an Oculink port alongside massive quantities of the fastest RAM on the market. While its raw CPU performance is held back by conservative factory power limits, Intel's X7 graphics power is an absolute standout. If you're dead set on picking up a high-end Panther Lake mini PC, this mini simply delivers significantly more hardware value than the Asus NUC at the exact same price point. Links to the VTI-490 are down in the description below. Oh, and if you want to see how the cheaper AMD variant performs, click on my dedicated review right here. Cheers!